But I mentioned Lydia Thorpe, the senator, and the sympathy she's now getting. Thorpe has now had threats against her made online by some flabby-bellied loser, a coward who didn't dare show his face, a racist, supposed neo-Nazi, gave a Nazi salute and also burned the Aboriginal flag. Police are investigating, have already had the video removed and the account deactivated, and I say good. Now, I know how distressing it can be to get death threats. Most are from cowards, but you never know. One guy threatened me, actually turned out to be an extremely dangerous criminal who got some jail time for it. So Thorpe has my sympathy as well, to that extent. Because we've got to be able to argue, of course, without facing violence and intimidation, and that includes Lydia Thorpe. But I will also say something else. Thorpe is a hypocrite. Now, the Prime Minister and some of the media have treated this video by this idiot as evidence of a much bigger and hugely sinister problem by inference on the evil no side, filled with racists, even though Thorpe herself is against the voice, because for her it still doesn't go far enough in dividing Australians by race.
Well, I have unfortunately seen that video, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. It is quite horrific that someone who is self-declared by his actions and his words a neo-Nazi out there showing such disrespect.
But then came Thorpe herself. Now, if the video by some nuff was terrible, racist, provoking fear, then what Thorpe did, Senator of the Australian Parliament, what she said in response was even worse, even more dangerous. Now, first, she blamed Albanese himself and his referendum for inciting this attack.
The referendum is an act of genocide against my people, and the Prime Minister knows exactly what he's doing. He wants the fascists to come out and get me.
Now, Thorpe is right to this extent. The Prime Minister has put a match to this country with his planned voice dividing us by race, pitching races against each other. It's been so ugly. What on earth do you think would happen when you do that? But for Thorpe to accuse Albanese of genocide now, of actually wanting fascists to attack her, I mean, what a disgraceful and inflammatory falsehood. And then there was this about the threats she's had, which I repeat are disgraceful as well.
And I can't ring 000. I can't rely on Victoria Police after they kill my people.
Now, once again, that is vicious and unfair and inflammatory. It's racist as well. What if police today got to do with the crimes, real or actually imaginary, of police 150 or so years ago? What? And here's the thing. Lydia Thorpe, who I repeat, who actually has a white father and a mother with both Aboriginal and Scottish ancestors, has been out there for a long time race baiting like this, seeming to me to be inciting a race war exactly like what this neo-Nazi idiot in that video is now joined to fight. I mean, he burned an Aboriginal flag. Well, that's disrespectful, but Thorpe tweeted in support of the black activists who set fire to the old Parliament House in Canberra. Seems like the old colonial system is burning down, she tweeted. Happy New Year, everyone. And on Australia Day, she again talked of war against an evil they, apparently white people.
This is a war! They are still killing us! They are still stealing our babies! They are killing our men! And they are still raping our women!
And now some fool, equally obsessed with race, has responded to Thorpe in kind with race taunts, insults and war talk of his own. Now, I'm disgusted by him, but I'm also disgusted by her. And Disgusted as I am by him, I can't pretend I'm surprised. In a race war, it's almost always the case, isn't it? One side creates its evil opposite and everyone loses. Everyone in the middle loses. All the more reason then that Australians now take a stand. No to this racial division before people really do get hurt. Joining me is the Nationals frontbencher, Barnaby Joyce, the former Deputy Prime Minister. Barnaby Joyce, your response to what Lydia Thorpe said today?
Look, as much as I disagree with Prime Minister Albanese, he's not a fascist. He's not part of some clandestine plot. He has views. He has views I fervently disagree with, but I do not for one moment think that he is maligned, malicious, or has a criminal intent behind them. But what I do acknowledge is we have divided this show up. This was a very, very bad idea to come forward with something that was totally plausible, totally acceptable, and that's recognition of Indigenous Australians, and then to staple all these other things to it. The voice, basically a selected group of people with oversight over government based on the colour of your skin that's there in perpetuity. When they say consultation, it has no effect. Scarborough, $16 billion deal's been held up at the moment because of consultation processes. In my community, I was out at an Aboriginal, what was a former Aboriginal mission yesterday. This is making our lives so difficult, and we want to park this, we want to move on from it, and please don't ever do this to our nation again. Please do not do that. It's
just dreadful. It's tragic what's going on, Barnaby. It's with this voice referendum, and I fear for what's going to come after October 14, because win or lose, I think it will just step up the tension unless wiser heads prevail, particularly from the Prime Minister down. The Albanese government, just switching topics here, something else that really worried me. The Albanese government's rejoined the United Nations Green Climate Fund. That's a huge slush fund. It's meant to raise $100 billion a year from rich countries like us. $100 billion a year, and then, trust these officials to give that money wisely to mostly poorer countries. Foreign Minister Penny Wong said she'd hand over, and I quote, modest contribution later this year. And she says we're giving this cash to the UN's Climate Fund, not directly to our own projects overseas, because that, she says, is what Pacific countries want. Is any of this a smart thing to do?
Well, what I can say is, as we tie ourselves up to this, we are destroying our economy. The ludicrous idea that we can run a first world economy on wind towers is just ludicrous. And now this money, of course, is going to come out of your taxpayers' pockets, your viewers. And the question has to be asked in some instances, is this because people want the temperature to go down or their bank balance to go up? And, how do we follow these things through? How do we understand that there's no graft, no corruption, that it's not just going to one person who controls the finances of their country and surprise, ends up with their family. These things, like all things, another thing Jacinta Price got right. You need to audit these processes. You need to see exactly where the money goes. And you have to also say that in Australia, we've got a few issues on at the moment as well. We've got people who can't afford their power bills, can't afford their grocery bills, can't afford their fuel bills, can't afford their rent. And you've got a few problems at home. You really have. And we've got to start looking after some of the people who call Australia home and live here and whose families have always been here.
Oh, look, global warming has been such a rort for the Pacific leaders. They cry, our islands are drowning, even though most are stable or growing. And they count on white guilt to hand over splundoons, as you say. Who knows how much of it really ends up where it's supposed to. And I don't trust the UN to hand out our money. It should be us handing out our money, at least as a, goodwill bribe, if you were. Barnaby Joyce, the Prime Minister, is going to China later this year. He's been given security advice not to take the RAAF plane because the communist regime will try to bug or hack it. But more worrying to me, I mean, I've just been watching incredible scenes, is that Chinese universities over the past few weeks have been putting up videos of their students doing things like war training. And the Chinese army has been releasing videos like this one of their military might and suggesting very clearly that they are now prepared for imminent war. Have a listen.
可以说，一旦启动一级战备，也就意味着随时将爆发大规模战争。
Imminent war, they said. Imminent preparedness. Is this a real threat, Barnaby? Are we doing enough to defend ourselves? Because I'm getting worried that we're here in a sort of daze, not expecting China to actually live up to what it's threatening.
Well, I think, as I always say, if you don't believe that if you ride the tiger that you won't end up in its belly. That's, and I think that is as true today as it was when it was first said. And what we also see with China, of course, is, you can judge them by their actions. South China Sea, their Tibet, their clashes with India on the border, their statements about Mongolia, their statements about territory that's actually part of Japan, their actions against the Philippines. We live in a different world. And that's why I've always said, from the moment I came back in the past as the Deputy Prime Minister, I started saying we've got to become as powerful as possible, as quickly as possible. And people said, don't say powerful because it scares people. And I said, OK, change it to strong. But it's the same. We have to become as strong as possible, as quickly as possible. That means you've got to prioritise. What is really important? Is it covering the country with wind factories and solar factories and transmission lines, or having cheap, affordable power? Is it sending money across to the UN so that they can dish it out to their mates and gosh knows where it ends up with? Or is it to make sure that our nation is as resilient as possible? Is it to sit back and reduce the amount of spending, actually reduce the overall amount of spending in defence? Or is it to say the world, unfortunately, has changed, and our number one job is to protect our people and to work with our allies in a formidable way so as not to create the war, but to make ourselves an absolutely and utterly resilient peace that no one would want to have a war with us, with our allies. Noting by ourselves, we are not strong enough, but with our allies, we are.
Can't agree with you more. A bully does not pick on someone who looks strong, they pick on someone who looks weak, and I think that we are looking weaker and weaker. Barnaby Joyce, thank you so much for your time.